Hello, I'm Dan Rather, and welcome to the CBS Evening News Online edition. Just ahead, President Clinton's new heart problems. He'll have to undergo another operation on his lungs. We'll give you details. Also, was ancient Egypt's King Tut murdered over 3,000 years ago? Scientists have finally answered that question. We'll give you the inside story and a reporter's notebook. We'll take a look back at two exclusive interviews face-to-face with Saddam Hussein and give you some of the details on what he didn't say on camera. It's all starting now on the CBS Evening News Online edition. 6 months after his heart bypass operation, former President Bill Clinton is going back into the hospital for more surgery. A buildup of fluid and scar tissue from the bypass is putting pressure on one of his lungs and causing him some discomfort. Surgeons will fix that, and Mr. Clinton is expected to make a full recovery quickly. The former president, who is 58, has been keeping a busy schedule since the bypass operation, including extensive travel to Asia for tsunami relief. CBS News medical correspondent Elizabeth Caledon has details.
Former President Clinton was all smiles today as he paid a visit to his former home.
I feel great.
He and former President George Bush were at the White House to brief the current president on their efforts to help victims of December's tsunami. But the main topic of conversation was Mr. Clinton's health.
It's a routine sort of deal, and it'll knock me out of commission for a week or two.
On Thursday, the former president will have surgery to correct a nagging complication from his quadruple bypass surgery last September. He will undergo general anesthesia as surgeons insert a small camera into his chest cavity and then attempt to drain fluid and remove scar tissue that has built up near the site of his earlier operation. The accumulation of fluid in the chest is a common occurrence after heart surgery. It usually fixes itself. Only 5% of cases require surgical intervention. In Mr. Clinton's case, the situation was starting to cause problems.
He had noticed over the past month or so that on steep hills he was getting winded a bit more easily. At the same time, he was starting to feel a bit of discomfort in his left chest.
Mr. Clinton has been in good health since his heart surgery, walking 4 miles a day, passing a stress test, even making the strenuous trip to Indonesia to help tsunami victims. He has no plans to slow down before or after his surgery.
President Clinton and President Bush are going to play golf tomorrow to raise money for the tsunami victims. It goes to show how sick he is.
Doctors say the difficulty of Thursday's procedure and Mr. Clinton's recovery time will depend on the amount of scar tissue that must be removed, something they just don't know yet. He's expected to be in the hospital for 3 to 10 days. Dan.
Elizabeth Caledon, thanks. For more about this surgical procedure and what it entails, I spoke a short while ago with the distinguished medical Dr. Michael Banbury, a heart surgeon at the famed Cleveland Clinic. I asked him whether this operation is risky.
It's not particularly risky. This is an elective procedure. The president or ex-president is in very good health, and so it's unlikely that he would get into serious trouble.
Well, President Clinton has a pretty hectic schedule. He's well known for it. How does this impact him? And is that a factor in what he's undergoing now?
Really, this is a quality of life issue. He probably feels some shortness of breath with activity, especially as he's traveling around the world. And this operation is designed to help relieve those symptoms.
I'm of the school, and I think a lot of other people are, anytime you go into the hospital to have anybody do anything with your heart, I classify that as serious. I gather from what you say, it isn't all that serious. Help me with this. I'm worried about it.
Right. It's not all that serious. First of all, this is not an operation on his heart. His heart has already been taken care of. This is really just to remove the peel of scar tissue that has trapped his left lung. And so I would say that the risk of this operation is quite low, certainly lower than his original heart surgery.
Doctor, thank you very much. In Egypt today, a team of detectives trying to solve an ancient mystery revealed what they learned about the untimely death of a young pharaoh whose mummy was found wearing a mask of pure gold. The clues they sought were under King Tut's skin. And CBS's Mark Phillips gives you the interesting inside story.
Call it CSI, Valley of the Kings, a crime scene investigation of a 3,000-year-old crime, if there was one. The mummified remains of Tutankhamun, the boy king of Egypt who died 3,300 years ago, were removed from his tomb so that modern technology could be used to try to solve an ancient mystery. Was King Tut murdered?
Some people say King Tut was murdered. Others say he was not murdered. They say there is a blow to the back of the head.
The blow to the back of the head theory comes from an old X-ray from an earlier examination that seemed to show bone fragments in the skull. This time, archaeologists and a television company brought in a high-tech CAT scan machine and a team of experts to peer back through 3 millennia at the remains of the 19-year-old king. What did they find? Nothing.
There is no indication of foul play.
They did find evidence of a badly broken leg that could have led to a fatal infection, hardly the stuff of ancient intrigue.
Here lies the pharaoh of another age.
King Tut has fascinated the modern world ever since the discovery of his tomb in 1922. The glittering treasures buried with the pharaoh have drawn museum goers ever since. The legend of the curse of King Tut's tomb, that several of the grave's early visitors are said to have met a violent end, hasn't hurt either. And that legend, murder or no murder, endures.
The case of the murder of King Tut is closed, but the mystery will never stop.
But with the murder mystery finally put to rest, so it's hoped will King Tut be. His body has been put back into its tomb, hopefully never to be disturbed again. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
From our reporter's notebook, one-on-one, up close with Saddam Hussein. We have twice interviewed him when he was the focal point of world headlines, each time as he was facing the threat of a U.S.-led attack. Tonight you will hear from a man who was with Saddam before, after, and during those interviews. Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in August 1990 caught the world by surprise. The question was, what would Saddam Hussein do now? Threatened with force? Would he fight or back down? Baghdad was the only place to get the answer.
Dan Rather reporting tonight from Baghdad, Iraq.
Then Saddam began rounding up foreigners, including Americans, as human shields.
Does Stuart get his milk?
Late one night, we got the news we'd been waiting for. The Iraqi president had agreed to an interview.
All we can say now is that we can conduct a dialogue with the United States over this point.
But that would include the possibility of your withdrawing from Kuwait?
Kuwait is part of Iraq.
Sadoun al-Zubaydi was Saddam's translator that night. He says that before the interview, the Iraqi president wanted to know about the American journalist he'd be facing.
He said, "This is a tough journalist, isn't he?" I said, "Yes, he's a very tough journalist. He has won the trust of the people by being tough."
There were tense moments.
President Bush has said that you are to be equated with Hitler, that you're a bully and a very dangerous man.
From which angle has Mr. Bush chosen to compare me with Hitler?
You invaded a weak neighbor who was no threat to you.
Do you remember what he said to you after the interview?
He said, "This man is not easy, but very, very polite."
Well, I'd take that. Saddam lost the war. And he lost Kuwait. But he survived and clung to power for 13 more years. On the eve of another war with America, we got a second exclusive interview. Once again, Dr. Zubaydi was at Saddam's side. Do you have you had any connections to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden?
We have never had any relationship with Mr. Osama bin Laden.
Away from the cameras, Saddam had his own questions. How had President Bush convinced the public that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and a link to 9/11, he wanted to know. It was clear the Iraqi president was cut off from the outside world and his staff was losing the information war.
They were not professional in the sense that they could deal with the international press. I mean, his press secretary never held a press conference.
Incredible.
Incredible, isn't it? So it all fell, when we had a crisis situation, it all fell on Saddam Hussein himself.
And this time around, Saddam bristled at challenging questions.
Mr. President, have you been offered asylum anywhere? And would you, under any circumstances, consider going into exile to save your people death and destruction?
I can understand the motive behind your question, which is excitement. This is a very American style. It may not be liked by some, but I can understand. We will die in this country, and we will maintain our honor.
In December of 2003, U.S. forces found Saddam hiding in a kind of spider hole of a bunker and arrested him. Today, Iraq's national security advisor said he expects Saddam to go on trial by the end of this year. More stories are just a click away, but be sure to join me on television for the on-air edition of the CBS Evening News. On Wednesday's broadcast, the 9/11 attacks. Of all the stories we've revisited in our Reporter's Notebook series, it's probably the biggest. We'll take you back to a day that changed America forever with some of the heroes of that day in a Reporter's Notebook. For CBSNews.com, I'm Dan Rather.